Good morning. Good morning. So my name is Gary Padmore. I have the honor of being the co-chair of the board of the Arts and Education Roundtable alongside my wonderful colleague, friend, and mentor, Tracy Lester. Also vice president of education and community engagement at the New York Philharmonic. This is an awkward picture, by the way. I'm like, don't look at the picture. I'm also a father of two beautiful girls, Camille and Isabel, and husband to Keisha. This is all this makes me up, right? This is who I am as a person, not just an artist and administrator, but I have all the things like you all do as well. So if this is your first time joining us today, shame on you. We missed you yesterday. But if you came back from yesterday's conference, I do hope that you enjoyed the experience. I don't believe that things just happen by chance. I really do believe that we all have a purpose in our lives and also especially through our work. Just as an example, yesterday I had the privilege of running into a new homie of mine, Sean, and I said, I wanted to go exactly where he was going. And we go up to 10T and we end up in this room and it says how to build a black utopia. I'm like, what the heck? This is like amazing to think. I know I work at the Philharmonic where there's not that many black folks. It's being recorded. Just kidding, I don't care. Whatever. But just to be in a space where I can be around folks who just believe in the liberation of our people and understanding what that means for us as artists as well. And then later on in the day, thinking about all the information that was imparted to me and to other folks from CoLab around disability and accessibility and how to create spaces that are truly equitable in that context. So many props to those who have been leading these panels. And actually, can we just give a quick shout out to those on the Roundtable staff as well as to those who are in the committee to really just lead all this work. Was Missy Copeland on the stage yesterday? It's crazy, right? Like, where was she sitting? Like, somewhere in this area? Anyway, all right. My mind is still blown. But a lot of information was imparted from that opening session as well. And I know that you all have things that you want to take away. You're talking to your colleagues and friends about as well. And I hope that this is a space where you can not only get recharged and refreshed with all the work that's happening, but also that you'll share it with people who are here and also, around, in your jobs, et cetera. Speaking of which, if you look over to my left, you'll see this wonderful table. Phil Alexander, always with the beautiful bow ties, holding up a postcard about our advocacy work. And so we do hope that today that you'll take postcards as it relates to your representative and your own work, because it does indeed, it starts with the arts, right? All right, cool. Right? Wow, that was kind of weak. All right. Are y'all awake? What's going on? We need more coffee? All right, we'll see. So in any case, I do want to, again, give a shout out to Kim and all the work that she's done, because as we know, the advocacy work was really spearheaded by the Roundtable staff and team. And so a lot of what we're going to hear in a couple minutes is really much linked to that work. And so just as a couple examples of that, this year alone, there was a $3 million initiative supporting arts instruction that was recently announced a couple months back, thanks to the people who will be coming up on stage. And it allowed for us to be able to have a citywide initiative to increase access to arts pathways and to sequential learning. So we know that the work that we do, it's a fight to really sustain this work. And the folks that we'll be hearing from in a couple minutes are the reason why it's a little bit easier to do this fight, right? And the other thing, if you all didn't know, there was a recent proposal from City Council. I'm not going to say the phrase accurately, but it included a lot of the important aspects and initiatives tied to the arts. And so with your advocacy and with their championing of our work, hopefully by next year and even beyond, we'll see our young people, our communities benefiting more and more from arts thanks to them. All right? Thank you. So with that, I want to pass it over. There is a special announcement that's happening here from Councilmember Powers and Abreu. So I wanted to just give the platform over to them, and then we'll get into the panel. So with that, we do have a special announcement happening, right? There's a special announcement. Okay, just making sure. All right. Breaking news. Dun, dun, dun.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you guys. I'm City Council Member Keith Powers. I'm here with Council Member Justin Brannan, the Chair of our Finance Committee, our Education Chair, Rita Joseph, and the Council Member for where we're standing right now, Council Member Sean Abreu. Before we do the entire, by the way, you're so much taller than me. Before we do the entire panels and agenda, we wanted to do something special to honor the work of arts education here in the Arts Education Roundtable. So what we decided to do is we wanted to bring an official proclamation from the City of New York and the City Council to say thank you, to celebrate, I think, 30 years, is that right? 30 years of the work here. Let's give them a big round of applause. As somebody who still believes I'm a 30-year-old, I can understand how important that is for an organization. So we're going to give it to you guys. We won't read the entire thing. Well, actually, okay, he wants me to read it. But we won't read the entire thing, but we will say the very end of it, which is the short part. The New York Arts in Education Roundtable has truly distinguished itself through its outstanding service and is worthy of the esteem of all New Yorkers. Therefore, be it known that we, the undersigned council members, gratefully honor the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable in celebration of its 30th anniversary for its outstanding service and enduring contributions to the community, and wish it continued success in all its future endeavors. This 13th of April in the year of 2023.
You can go more to the left.
A little more to your left?
Yep.
Good?
One more.
One more.
I'll be brief.
Thank you.
And with that, before we depart, I want to hand it over to our council member, our local council member for this area, Council Member Sean Abreu.
Good morning, everybody. I'll keep it brief. I just want to say I'm so proud to be standing here alongside my colleagues, Majority Leader Keith Powers, Finance Chair Justin Brannan, who has the money, Education Chair Rita Joseph, and our Chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee, Ossé, who just joined us. To be the council member for this district is just really an honor, and to have this event here in my district is also incredible. All students deserve creative outlets and high-quality education in the arts, whether that be dance, music, theater, and media arts, creative writing, and visual arts. This organization is devoted to making sure this is a reality, ensuring that all of our children are able to express themselves through artistic endeavors. Thank you so much for doing this here, and really keep on the fight.
All right, 30 years. We're getting old. This morning I was talking about progressive lenses, so definitely sort of reflective of where we are as a community. Hopefully, we're still fresh. But thank you so much for your acknowledgement of the Roundtable community. And actually with that, I won't say much longer. I'll pass it over to my wonderful colleague and friend, Alex Santiago-Jirau. Thank you so much.
I think I'll just grab. We're gonna do the panel.
Okay. Actually, we'll invite all the other council members up as well during this. Thank you.
Yeah, just come on up again. I'll introduce you and you're here, council members. Hi, everybody. How you feeling? Good. Ready for a panel on governmental policy on arts education? That's the spirit. 30 years. That's exactly my age. Thank you. Here we are. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Santiago-Jirau. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at New York Theater Workshop, and I'm the Vice Chair of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. It's so great. Okay, clap. Yes, I'll take it. Work. Thank you so very much for being here with us. And thank you to our panelists. I'll do a quick introduction and we'll get into it because I know that that's what you're waiting for. I'll ask a couple of questions of them and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Sounds good? Fantastic. Welcome to our council members. Immediately to my left, this is the Honorable Keith Powers. I have to do it properly. Our majority leader representing District 4. Yes. The Honorable Rita Joseph, who represents District 40 and is the Chair of Education. Former teacher, always a teacher. Forever educator. So that's even more important. Honorable Justin Brannan from District 43. As you heard, the chair of the Finance Committee with the keys to the safe box or something along those lines. And a musician, which is even more important. Rock on. And then last but not least, the Honorable Ossé, who is the representative for District 36 and the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee. Thank you all so very much for being with us this morning and being in conversation about arts education. We know that you are supporters of arts education in the City Council, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't supporters and understood the value of an arts education for our youth. And that's what this conversation is about. You heard from Gary before, and I'll do the right phrasing about this, that in the recent City Council response to the city budget, all of the things that we're asking for many things, but a bunch of the things that our campaign, It Starts With the Arts, is asking for has been included in the City Council's response to the mayor's budget. And that's what the work is now. How do we get the things in that response, the support that the City Council has expressed for fully funding or increasing the funding for arts education a reality? So I'm not only going to talk to you about arts education and the value of an arts education, but some strategy about how we all get that done. Sounds like a plan? Yeah, here we are. Let's start with, and we can pass the mic around, let's start with a personal question, which is, can you talk about a powerful experience that you've had in the arts, or a pivotal moment that made you realize that the arts are powerful, not only for you as an individual, but for your community? What is that? And we can go down the line, or if anybody wants to jump in, go ahead.
Hi, guys. So mine's going to be a little different than others, I feel like, but I mean, I am the least artistically inclined person on planet Earth, or at least in the city of New York. I don't play an instrument, I can't draw, I can do anything at all, okay? I'm very bad. And this is a true personal story. You know, when I was growing up, and I was probably around in high school, like many others, I started to get more attached to certain interests in your life. And Justin and I, let me just say it more frankly, Justin and I both got into politics through essentially punk rock and hardcore music. You can applaud for that.
Yes.
And I'll be more direct. I used to go see Justin's band play before we even knew each other.
Work.
And when I was like a teenager, growing up in New York City, growing up near the East Village and things like that, that was where I started to find myself and start to find political voice, because there's so much politics involved in that music. Start to think about issues more critically. Then went to study political science and took it on from there. Never thought I'd get into politics. I remember the first day of college when they asked us what we wanted to do with our political science degree. I said I wanted to run a record label, and that was the way I found my voice. And what I realized over time is that people have just different paths in life, and some people are going to be great at math, some are going to be artists, some are going to be good at music, and not having that as an option for people to find their voice and their identity and to find themselves, especially at the really hard years when you're in, like high school and areas like that, and you're trying to find yourself. That's going to be the way that people are going to find out to express themselves, and then perhaps they take an interest in school altogether, because they're going to be excited to show up, they're going to find themselves. So to me, that was really always the thing that stuck in the back of my mind, was that people are there's going to be something that's going to get you into the school building every day. And for some people, it's going to be your friends, it's going to be art, music, or all of the above. And you have to provide those things to people because that is critical to making sure that people learn and learn the way that they want to learn. And then for a lot of people find themselves and find their identity. So that is kind of my personal story, to be honest, is just realizing over time that in that school building is so critical to your life when you're a student. It's where you are so much of your week and day. And there's so many tough challenges inside the school building for people. But if you provide something to them that is a pathway to something that is bigger and better for their life, you are going to make them find themselves. You're going to make school much more enjoyable experience and do a lot for those people's lives. And that's why I think it's so important.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So my experience is a little different. I went to PS 139 in District 22, and I had Miss Alexine Fenty as my music teacher. So every Friday we had music rehearsal, and I remember when I went on to DIPMIS, I went on to music, I learned how to write music, and I remember my teacher's name till today, Miss Bradford, and we learned how to read and write music. And then when I went on to become a teacher, in college I minored in theater. I performed the Raisin in the Sun. And so my life in public in arts has been a little different. And then when I became an educator, I was able to bring arts into the school where my students were allowed to. Every June, I wrote up for a grant, and we were able to go see a Broadway show. I promised them that one experience while they were under my care. But then I wrote a grant in partnership with an assembly member in Brooklyn, and we had Moving Mountains come to the school. So it was arts, theater, and dance. And the final project was to do Matilda. And we did Matilda with an all-black cast. I did makeup, costume, and we filmed, and then I had a little film screening. We did our own little fake red carpet. The kids came. And that was their experience, and it stayed with them. Till today, they'll see me, Miss Joseph, you remember that time when we did this and this? So that's what art means to me, and that's why I'm fighting to make sure that all New York City students have access to this unique piece of the curriculum. And I want it embedded in curriculum. It shouldn't just be an option or an add-on. So I got you.
I really owe my entire life, my career, and I wouldn't be sitting here today, I don't think, if I hadn't learned 3 or 4 chords in public school. And I was at McKinley Junior High School in Bay Ridge, and 3 or 4 chords really afforded me a decade of touring the world. And I still only know those 3 or 4 chords. But you don't really need much more than that. I think for all of us up here, it's really about the fight to make art and music and culture in public schools be seen as more than just extra and to be seen as essential. It's just as essential as math and chemistry and all this stuff you'll never use in your real life. Art and music, it makes, like Keith said, it makes you who you are. It's in your DNA, And I remember being in public school, and they would take us on trips to the museum, and being so inspired by what I was seeing that I got so impatient that I had to run home and create my own art because I was so inspired by what I was seeing. And I think we just want more kids to have that same experience, right? More kids to be inspired and also break down the barrier of art and culture being seen as only for fancy people, right? Or there's this real barrier to entry to paintings that are in a museum, that it can only be done by this upper class of folks and not by the people who are there viewing the paintings and stuff. So, but music in schools is super important to me. I never took a guitar lesson. I learned a couple of chords with Mr. Klami in McKinley Junior High School. And it really afforded me a career, and I wouldn't be in politics today if I hadn't gone through that avenue of playing punk rock and hardcore, and I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't gotten lessons of music in public schools. So I think for all of us too, like the stuff that we cared about when we were growing up, we still care about now. Like I still care about this stuff now. The cool part is now we're in a position where we can actually do something about it. So we appreciate you having us today. Thank you.
It's hard to follow up all of those sentiments shared by my colleagues, but art is everything to me. I come from a family of artists and musicians, so it was always ingrained in who I was as a person. In elementary school, I was able to play the lead role of Macbeth in 4th grade, and I remember being so nervous about having that responsibility of being the lead role and memorizing lines, but it prepared me not only to be an actor in training. I thought I was going to go into acting. I was on Sesame Street once upon a time. But it gave me the tools of public speaking and expression and a bit of therapy throughout my years of schooling. And I never thought I would end up being an elected official today, but so many of those skills that I learned through art that was provided through my education are things that I exhibit through my work day in and day out. And those are the opportunities that I think every single one of us in this room wants to provide to the children of New York City, right? Not necessarily putting them on the right track to be the next Picasso or Jay-Z, but potentially they could become the next Picasso or Jay-Z, but giving them the tools of expression and of knowing oneself so that when they move on to business or politics or owning a laundromat maybe, they're able to express themselves in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been able to before without that knowledge in those classes that were provided through arts and education.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. And don't we have the right champions in City Council for this work? I would be remiss if I also didn't mention that during the pandemic, post-pandemic, certainly not only in New York City, but around the country, we are seeing students experience some really hard times. And we're seeing some policymakers make some decisions around the country, banning books and care for trans youth, and lack of education around institutional racism, and censorship, all of these things, some of which we see in New York City, right? Just because of this is a global metropolis where we experience many problems. But arts education is also essential, as you were saying, for the well-being of students and the well-being of communities. I wonder if you could speak about the ways you see arts education or the arts in general be a positive force for development in your communities. Where are you seeing it in your communities?
Should I start this time? Sure. I mean, thinking about how crazy the world is right now, art has always been at the forefront of many different revolutions that we've seen, not only across this country, but across this planet. And a lot of that art that was created in those movements were pushed forward by young people, right? Young people that were fed up by draconian laws that were being passed in their country. We saw a lot of that in the summer of 2020. That's when I jumped into my race to run for office. And art was such a big part of my campaign in terms of getting a lot of people focused and aware of a local election like the one that I was running. Again, as I was saying before, art is therapy, art is expression, but it could also be used to push social movements, right? I often say that politics is theater and theater is art, right? And how do we, as artists, create a different narrative in terms of pushing us forward and fighting against fascism? So within my community, gun violence is something that is on the top of the minds of many of my young constituents. And even during our past participatory budgeting process where they were putting together presentations on their projects, just the art that they were creating to express the pain, but also the fight that they had within them, and wanting to see change within their community was so gripping and moving to see as an elected official, which just proves to all of us, even though we don't need much proving in this room, how powerful art can be, again, in keeping our community safe.
I would say just sort of as an origin for inclusion and tolerance and love is really founded on art. I mean, I think growing up, the kids I grew up with and what they exposed me to, it just broadens your horizons in ways that you might not realize at the time. But certainly, as a kid growing up and now looking back, it's like, wow, I got into all this cool stuff because my friend was gay. My friend was, I was growing up with someone who was bi. And that was, I didn't know that at the time, but it exposed me to a whole new world that I think then as you grow up and you go on to do whatever you're doing, it never leaves you, I think. And I think art just has a way of, what's the quote? After silence, the only thing that comes close to expressing the inexpressible is art. And it's just so true. And I think some people get it and some people don't, right? But I think expanding that access and giving more people the opportunity to get art or to at least see how it makes them feel is really important, because I do think it unlocks just a whole new world, sort of this of like a kaleidoscopic view of the world that I don't think you would have without the appreciation for art and music and culture.
Thank you. To me, art also represents social justice, giving students a voice to speak up on things that matters. And it comes in various forms, whether it's through writing, through art, to dance, to theater, artistic expression, also allows students to express themselves. They've been going through a lot. Mental health support, we know that, because they reach out to us and they let us know that. So through art, we have art therapy. It's important for students to also engage in that space, and we provide it for them, make sure the funding is there. Everything always ties down to the funding. So we got to make sure that we are funding those fundamental things, not just art, not just social studies, math, and writing, but the art, and it comes into the classroom, but it can't be, like you said, censored or banned or not supporting. It has to be inclusive, and it has to include all voices, and that's why it's important also that young people are engaged in these conversations. So that's the thought. I'm seeing it, and it goes back into the classrooms to allow teachers to have that freedom too. Usually they tie the teachers with so much constraint that they don't get a chance to do this. So I would love to see more of that happening inside our classrooms, where our students get to express themselves and allow the teachers to express themselves as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's all right. I just, to your question about, I think particularly right now, I cannot even imagine being a young student right now with the social pressures and in social media and the sort of impact on that in your life. Your whole life is exposed. It's not like when I went to school and you just went home and you met your students you met your friends downstairs. I don't know. I'm a little bit old, I guess. But now it's just the pressures, the bullying, all of that still exists. And then you talk about what's happening nationally for people, what they're seeing happen as people are trying to express themselves in their identity and being told when you turn on the TV every single day that this state or this place is telling you that you don't exist, that you don't, your identity isn't real, that what you're feeling isn't real. I can only imagine it's a very dark place for a lot of people right now to try to identify their identity. I do think arts, music, theater to help people find that. And also, like I said earlier, I think for a lot of people, maybe they're not good at certain, chemistry is kind of a waste of time, and I wasn't that good at chemistry. And but if you're having that and then all the social pressures, every day you have to go to school and you have to go to the place where you just don't fit in, or and I think this really does provide a pathway to people to find themselves and find their friends, find something they're good at, and to continue to make them want to be motivated and find their talent. And that's why I think it's so important. And that's what Councilor Joe said. It needs to be embedded into the school. It can't be an option. It can't be an extracurricular. It is has to be part of the curriculum. This is why we are fighting for it to be part of our city budget, so every school can have a guaranteed program, and that every school can have when the principal's looking at budget cuts and things like that, that we have an opportunity to provide the funding to boost that, because that is what students are looking for that. And they are looking for themselves, and arts and theater and music are the way to find themselves in my eyes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And just to note that New York State is only one of 19 other states around the country that does not include the arts as a core academic subject. Did you all know that? So thank you. There's some work that we have to do at the state level to make sure that the arts are considered a core academic subject, right? Let's talk about money, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's talk about money.
Why not?
So I think we're all in agreement about the power of the arts, the power of arts education to provide a well-rounded education as a source of wellness for students. But we also know that the arts are a huge part of the New York City economy. It's about 13% of our economy, right? And we know that in the city. We know the value for tourism, we know the value of Broadway, we know the image that it represents, the world-class museums, but there is a disconnect, as we've been talking about, there's a gap between what we know the arts produce, the jobs that it can create, not just as artists, but behind the stage as administrators, in advertising, all of the wraparound creative industries that support this economy in the city. But there's a disconnect between what we're offering New York City youth and the rest of the economy. Why does that gap exist, you think? Right? That on one side we pay lip service to arts education, and on the other side we underfund it. Why is that happening? And how do we convince policymakers that, as we know, there's a direct line between arts education and employability and the economic future of the city? There's the question.
All right, I'll step into this one first. I represent some of the most major institutions in the world: the Met, Carnegie Hall, MoMA, you name it, my Museum Aisle. And those are obviously world-class institutions and us as New Yorkers get to enjoy, but they are I represent Broadway too, the major drivers of tourism in the city. It is a reason millions of people want to come here. It is Broadway and the arts and our culture are the major differential to me between us and another city. And I was talking about no hate on anybody from Chicago. I love Chicago. But I was talking to a colleague the other day about Joe Borelli about Chicago. And he was like, Chicago's okay. And I go, Chicago doesn't have what New York has. Doesn't have Broadway, doesn't have arts, doesn't have culture. It is the big sort of...
It does, but at different levels.
What's that?
This side of the gallery was saying.
I know that. I'm just saying, we have Broadway. I get it. You can see Wicked, and you can see Wicked in Chicago too. Come to New York and see it. But I mean, I'm not hating on Chicago. I used to live in Chicago, but I'm just saying, it does. New York has something, and Chicago is the wrong example. Fine, but I was gonna say Columbus, Ohio, and somebody's gonna yell at me for Columbus, Ohio. But anyway, it is such a big part of the fabric and our identity, but we do not talk enough about what it means to our economy. And that's what we have to talk about a lot more to demonstrate that to people. How many jobs are created by those large and small institutions? How much it draws into the city? How much funding it in the early stages will help employability, create a pipeline of jobs and more opportunities. I just think sometimes we think about it as just like a thing we go do. We have to think about it as a thing that really exists here in the city for a lot of reasons. So I think that just honestly is just talking about a lot more too, and making that connection, and being more clear when we talk about funding it in the schools that it's also about creating jobs, and it's about creating people's opportunities to get jobs. I think we're not doing that. All of us did talk a lot about what it means to find your passion. We also do need to talk more about the economy, and I'll end on that. And I apologize to the city of Chicago for my comment, and to the people over here.
Just for the right side, right?
That side.
I certainly agree with Councilmember Powers. We don't look at the micro of Broadway, and also the smaller theaters. They create jobs, opportunities, and we might have to create a pipeline through public schools to know that these jobs exist. For example, I have King's Theater in my district. It's a gem of Brooklyn, and Brooklyn's in the house, yes, yes. And I was talking in terms of partnership with them that our 5th graders can go and intern and see that behind the scenes, they're stagehands. Those are union jobs. That they can be, you may not be a performer, but you are part of that, that mosaic of theater in the arts. You could be the announcer, you can do so many different things, but students are not exposed. And that's why it was so important for me to pass that bill that all students in high school get an ID NYC that gives them access to cultural institution. I just passed this bill. So every high schooler come this fall will get an application in the schools. They were not in the schools and available and accessible to students. I just passed this bill so they can have them in the schools, which give them access to cultural institutions. Starting from 10 years old all the way up to high schools. And we encourage the educators to come out. I'm gonna take my first field trip. Anybody wanna invite me? I'll take the first field trip to the cultural institution with these students and give them the opportunity, expose them. We also have to expose them. We also have to make sure that it's inclusive. When we talk about art education, sometimes some Black and brown communities have been left out for so many years. So it's time that we invite them to the table and realize that there are career pathways, there are different ways to getting into art education, and we must support it. The 4 of us, we talk about it and we are about it. But we want others to come on board and be about it with us.
I think the economic argument is great because I think it speaks to what everyone in this room is trying to do, is make people see that arts is essential. And it's not extra, it's not just entertainment, it's a pathway to a career. And I think making that argument is important to sort of, renewing the soil, right? Like if we're not creating, I think like she said, if we're not creating new artists, then we're just gonna be looking at Picasso for the next 500 years. I want the next Picasso, right? We need to fill the Museum of Modern Art with new modern art. And if we're not giving art to kids in public school, then where is that coming from? It's just gonna be the Museum of Natural History, right? So we need to encourage and engender new artists, and remind people of the value to the city's overall economy that the arts play. And like Rita said, when I was in high school, the kids that were stagehands, they're probably retired union carpenters by now, right? I'm still up here working for a living. So there's pathways there. It's not only being a painter or a dancer. It's a whole industry there that I think there's probably more kids I went to school with that, got into careers in those pathways and became like, chemists or something. Chemistry's taking a lot of heat today. Yeah. Down with chemistry, up with the arts.
I was going to say thank you for that. There are many arts educators and representatives organizations in the audience that have career development programs. Literally providing internships and career training and placing students in cultural organizations all around the city. And those programs also need more funding. So just saying that, but Chi.
So we're talking about money, right?
Yeah.
New York City is one of the, if not the most impactful city in terms of the amount of taxpayer dollars that is invested in our cultural institutions and organizations. And that's great, but that's still under $200 million. And when you look at a $102 billion budget, and then you look at the industry like culture, which has an output of a multi-billion dollar economic impact on our city, we have to reflect on the amount of money that we are investing in culture. And I think we should invest more, not only into our cultural institutions and organizations, but of course our students and the curriculum within our schools because of its economic impact on our city as a whole, the tourism that it brings, the impact that it has on small businesses in whatever neighborhood that cultural institution is. Everyone here on this stage, my colleagues and I, we all get it. These 3 are on the budget negotiation team, and As you saw in the budget response from the City Council, the Council called for an investment in arts and education. The Council called for an investment in our cultural institutions and organizations. And the day right after, the mayor responded with wanting to see even more cuts across the board to various city agencies. And I'll say it up here, the Council gets it. We just need to convince some other folks that have a lot more money to make sure that this is incorporated within the budget. You have champions, you have fighters that are on this stage today. You have a council that understands how important arts and education is, how important culture is, but we got to convince a mayor that may not get it. And I'm willing to make that we're here to fight, and we want all of you in this room to know that as well as this budget comes to a close.
And I have my last question, and then we'll open it up to some questions in the audience, but to say that arts education as a matter of equity, it's also a matter of racial equity. We have one of the most segregated public school systems in the country. And everybody wants to come to New York because New York City is the arts capital of the world. But is it the arts capital of the world for Black and brown youth in our public school system, right? So it's another pathway to employment, career, education, and a life. And so that's another part of the argument, right? That the arts should not only be for those that can afford it in New York City, as Representative Brannan was saying, it should be for all of us. And it's a matter of racial equity in the city as well. So that's part of I think the argument that we have to make as well. What are we gonna do? What are you going to do? That's my last question. What can we all do? What are you going to do, and what are we all going to do to push for that budget? What is the fight that awaits us ahead?
Yeah, great question. And I think I definitely want to uplift some of my past sentiments that I shared in the last answer. This council has been fighting for culture, for our students, for arts and education. We have a lot more work to do in terms of convincing an administration that maybe doesn't believe in the same vision that each and every single one of us has in this room. I came to politics through activism, and I do believe that the power lies with the people. And there's a lot of people in this room here today that have voices, that have the voices of students as well, that need to be speaking up alongside, if not in lockstep with the council here today, and making sure that the administration knows that arts and education is necessary. It's essential. It's not an extra curricular activity. It's something our students need. It's something our city needs, not only in terms of the economic impact that culture and art has on our city, but it provides public safety to each and every single one of our students in a time where that is a conversation that we're hearing a lot throughout the news. So, I'm here to fight. I'm here to speak up and call out things that I don't agree with in terms of where our money's being spent, whether it's on robotic dogs or whatnot. But I also would love to hear from each and every single one of you, and I want your voices to be, uplifted as well. Because when it comes down to the budget, sometimes it feels isolating, in the council, in terms of the public not knowing how impactful this $102 billion budget has on each and every single one of our lives. But we need people to pay attention, and we need people making calls and posting things on social media, showing up at City Hall. We need people power in order to make this happen.
Yeah, the council just put out its preliminary budget response. So basically, if the mayor agreed with everything in our response, we could pass a budget right now, right? But we're going now into 2 more months of negotiation where we're going to have to go back and forth on a lot of stuff. But everything that's in that document is something that the council believes is worth fighting for. So I would say make sure your local council members know how important this is to you. Start there. The more backup that we have when we're in those rooms negotiating, when I can go into a room and say, look, I've got 35 members who really care about this issue, there's power there, and that's real, right? If more members are prioritizing arts and education and culture and education, everything that we believe in this room, the more members that are making that a priority, the better chance that we have at getting it done. And then just putting heat on the mayor to make clear what you want to see in the budget, right? This money is your money. It's not my money. And making your voices heard, but certainly starting on the local level, make sure that your local members understand how much you guys care about this, so that they'll prioritize it when we start having those conversations.
Thank you. Yes, call your local representatives, but also one of the things I've always said is get young people involved. This impacts their daily lives. I'll wait for them on a hearing. Anybody knows me, I'll do a 13-hour hearing just so students could come, so they can hear their voices. It's important because this impacts their daily lives. My teachers, make it a class project that they come and testify. They show up at the executive hearings, anything around arts education, culture. Have your students raise their voice. They can submit testimony. You can email it. It could be a class assignment that you're going to fight for this because we all believe in it. So I'm here, the four of us, like Councilmember Brannan just said, we need you to back us up. While we're in there fighting, knowing that you guys have our back, while we're inside at the table, kicking and yelling and call the mayor and let him know how important arts education is to young people across this city, because it's important to us. That's why we're here, and you have us. You already got the champions here. Now we just make sure we build this team to keep fighting for that.
Trying to think which other city I can insult very quickly before. Just from a process standpoint, just from a process standpoint, I'll just explain where we're at. So the mayor puts out his budget in January, and then the city council holds a series of hearings on that for every agency. And then we put out our response, which is what we've been talking about a lot, which is to say, here's all the things we think are missing in the budget, and here's what the city council's priorities are. And in that, and it's important, is that we have all the arts education funding in there, thanks to these folks who really pushed hard to make sure it got in there. Me too, but them too. And so we had a budget team, we put it out. Now we hold a series of hearings again on he'll put the budget out, and then we'll do a series of hearings, and then it's like the time to figure out what we're passing. Between now and June, mid-June, I'd say, or maybe end of June, you have to really get organized and to make sure that wherever you're working, wherever you live, that also you're making sure that your council members are prioritizing this. Everybody, this is like apple pie, but it's not just about like being in support of it, it's about prioritizing it. And so making sure that when we get into those budget conversations, they're speaking up in favor. I know I'm getting cut off. So anyway, talk to your council members, make sure they're prioritizing it so we can go to the other side of City Hall and fight for this.
Great, we're at time. Now we're gonna go with questions, yes. Oh, questions. You can scan, can you scan from there, the QR code? Sort of, okay. Or you can go to that bit.ly. Let's raise your hand. We have a hand in the back, yeah. Gary will be our runner. Can we just have yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
That's a good idea too.
You're hired.
We can make it
Great.
Line.
Thank you, man.
If you all are able.
We tried technology and we decided we're still artists at heart.
This is not so much a question, but perhaps another means of advocating for the arts. When arts education is truly collaborative, it's an exercise in democracy. So as much as I want a healthy arts economy and students being able to find their own voice and vibrant arts community, I would also like to have a vibrant and functioning democracy.
Me too.
So
that's right.
If that's useful for you, and Councilmember Ossé, I really love the analogy that you made about politics being theater and theater being art. art making, especially collaboratively, is a practice in democracy. It's messy. There's often conflict. There are differing opinions. But in the end, the show must go on, and so decisions must be made, right? Much in the same way that policies must be made and decisions must be made. So not all art making is like that, but my hope is that when we gather here at the Roundtable, we're sharing a lot of ideas, and a lot of these breakout sessions are about collaborative art making. And to me, that is very much the essence of democracy. It's process. We're always a work in process as a society.
Thank you. Raise your hand. Oh, yes, Keith in the back.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you all so much for being here today. You're busy people, and the fact that you took out time to be with us I'm very grateful. So many of us here are representatives of nonprofits who are contracted vendors with the New York City DOE, and historically, it takes us a very long time to get paid for the services that we render. So what can we do as a community to advocate for change that would result in us getting paid a little more quickly? Because this really presents significant cash flow challenges for us as nonprofits.
The finance chair is going to answer.
So I was the former chair of the contracts committee, where I really learned that I have a T-shirt that says "No procurement, no peace." It's a really big deal, and unfortunately, procurement reform is not a very sexy issue, but it affects a lot of people. I think this mayor appreciates it more than most. Certainly, you have a controller that gets it. I have a bunch of bills on this. I just introduced a bill the other day about interest payments on, when you guys are waiting to get paid. It's a real issue. I think we're finally getting to a point where, at the very least, people understand the real life impact that it has. But ultimately, we need to take action on it. I have a raft of bills that I've introduced on this. Really, it needs to come from the mayor's side. The controller is pushing as well, but we hear it all the time. And I worry most of all about the smaller nonprofits who, they can't float $1 million, right? I have some groups that I give $5,000, $10,000 to. If they can't get that money, they might close. So there needs to be equity around that too, because I think a lot of unfortunately, some of the bigger nonprofits who can afford to sustain themselves while they wait to get paid, that's great if you're in that place of privilege, but most groups aren't. So that is something absolutely that we could use your help on, because we get it. Not everyone would even understand what you're talking about, but more and more people do, at least on our side. I know you guys know what that is, but for politicians to know what that means, it really went from being this sort of arcane thing a couple of years ago that now more and more people are talking about it. So just keeping the heat up and keeping the pressure up look, giving more money to these sectors is important, but not if you then don't get paid the money, right? Like, I can say we're giving all this money to arts and culture, but you're not going to get it until next year. That doesn't really help much. So it's absolutely something that's on our radar. I can follow up with you on it, but really getting as many people as possible to talk about procurement reform and all that stuff is how you get it sort of to stay into the bloodstream.
The question there's a question in the back. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all your work, and thanks for being here today. During your talk this morning, I've heard a lot of different ideas about the benefits of arts education. In your experiences, what have you seen to be the single greatest narrative that gets arts funding at the governmental level?
Well, I think that one of the challenges that we face in New York City very particularly is that the agency that the principals have over, this is just very little technical, but basically principals are like CEOs of their schools and have a lot of agency over it. And so when you're making decisions and when they're making decisions in your budget, sometimes arts is the first thing out the door for folks, and we hear that a lot from people that they're cutting these programs and so forth and so on. So I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that it's embedded and it's separate from, and we have guaranteed funding for it, so that it's not one of the things that gets sliced out when you start thinking about, all right, I have to amend my budget and things like that. And I say that that's not like the most interesting answer, but it is actually the truth. And so I think making sure there's a guarantee for arts is like something everybody can sign on to, everybody can agree with, and you have to do it separately so that principals don't have to face this sort of added pressure of how to make this all work. So when we talk about more money, we're trying to put more money into it to give them more money and then separate it. That's helpful. Everybody, like I said, all our colleagues, doesn't matter what party you're in or whatever, agree with the idea that art should be in the classroom. Nobody disagrees with that. It's prioritizing that issue, and then it's when you get to when the rubber hits the road and it gets to the school level, then making sure that it's not the victim of cuts when they have to make those hard decisions. So, and principals don't want to do that either. They want to have a school that has enrichment in it. So I think understanding that is helpful, because what we're trying to do is to say that's a separate part, it's guaranteed. That we used to be, and it changed, but to make sure that that is like sort of fully embedded and it's guaranteed. Everybody agrees with that. So, but I think that it's just now the political will to get to there and to understand that issue. What's that? And mandating it and then creating a separate stream for it, I think is what actually, when you get to the actual point of needing to make this work, that's how you're going to make it work, so that principals don't feel this added pressure of having to cut an art teacher because they have a bunch of parents who want to make sure their math teacher stays, something like that.
There's another question in the back, and then there's a few questions up front. Thank you, Gary.
Yes, funding is very important. Give us all the money, great. And actually, let us have the money so we can do the things that we can do. I think one of the biggest things that has stifled the arts education world is the system of background checks, and how that has really been a hindrance to bringing artists onto the payroll and what that means. And as a teaching artist, you have to do a background check for one organization. Then you apply for another organization, because we know that's part-time work. So you can work for 4 different organizations, and you have to be cleared 4 different times. That does not make sense. My fingerprints are in the system. They've been in the system for 10, 20 years now. You have all my information, right? Why is there not one singular system where it says, you've been cleared, you can work for everybody? Just get re-cleared in 5 months. Why do I need to go fill out paperwork, waste paper, kill trees, detriment communities? And it's just, that's what's stifling. It's money, right? It's getting the money, but also trying to hire people to do the work that you want us to do. And how is that going to be fixed?
I've just been dealing with something with DYCD where a guy where an applicant who was looking to run sort of like an after-school basketball program at a NYCHA community center found out that they were demanding that he have a college degree. It's why? So this is something that is really just starting to surface for us, that we're understanding how rigorous some of these, some of this bureaucracy is. I think obviously there's certain safeguards that are in place for a reason, but I think there's a lot of redundancy there that I think we need to look into. And I think as you see other cities that are starting to have the conversation around reimagining those barriers as we're trying to, we have 30,000 vacancies in the city right now, right? So some of those vacancies are because what the requirements are to get a job is just not attainable, and you can make more money in the private sector and work from home. So we need to be doing something to attract more talent, and certainly making it easier for folks like you to bring in artists from the outside. So it's funny that you mentioned it, because I've just been dealing with this, and it was really mind-blowing to hear the things they were throwing in the way of these folks who just want to, run a program at a NYCHA community center. So certainly something we want to look at.
And one last thing on that, and I think this is more of a federal issue, enough of the drug tests for marijuana. I mean, if you're trying to hire artists, you shouldn't be checking for marijuana, so.
I mean, the licenses have been taken a while, so we haven't been partaking.
I just wanted to add, I mean, it's hard to follow that one. I just wanted to add one point, though, which is that's a great question because it is exactly the type of stuff you should bring to your council member, to us. These are every day I feel like there's an issue that someone raises to us about some bureaucracy or some other issue, and it's happening, but it doesn't always get brought to us. We can go to DOE. We can talk to them about that issue. We can see why there's redundancy on this. Sometimes these are just things, just the way the process worked, or sometimes it's to account for a past problem and now maybe it doesn't really exist anymore. And so that's like a perfectly good type of thing you should bring to not just like be vent about it or think about it. You actually should raise it to your council member, to us, and we will at least go to the DOE and try to figure out why that is or address it. I'll give you one very quick example. This is right before COVID. I had some parents in my district who had fourth graders who were getting ready to do all the school admissions for middle school, and were complaining to me, this is right before COVID, that they were sending their kid when their kid was sick to school because in the admissions process, sickness is counted against you, or there's points for sickness. So I actually went to the DOE and made this point as a past administration, and I said to them, it's kind of ridiculous these fourth graders and these seventh grader parents are forcing their kid to go to school when they have a 100-degree fever just because they have to get, and then going home in the middle of the day just because they can't lose 5 points on their application when they're going to middle school or high school. And they actually, the hearing we had right before COVID, it was an education committee hearing, I believe, they actually told us they were going to repeal that. Then COVID hit, and imagine what that policy looks like then. But that was one of the things where just parents just brought this up to me and how ridiculous it was, and also that every single school had a different policy around different points you get for sickness and absences. Some gave 10 points, some did 5 points. So that was one of those things that people were just experiencing, and nobody was bringing it to us, and we actually got that fixed, and it's actually not part of the Rubicon anymore, but it is a rubric rather. That is the type of thing that you should be bringing to us and we can try to address.
Thank you. There's questions up front. Yes, Gary.
Okay, sorry, we only have time for one more
question.
So you'll be, final words, final question.
This is kind of a simple but not simple question.
Uh-oh.
The entry point for a discretionary fund application. So it's very nebulous to find an entry point to access, a city council member without a lobbyist for many small arts organizations. So what exactly are you looking for in terms of criteria for a successful discretionary fund application?
I used to be a lobbyist, so I'll take that question. We did this process. It is a maddening process, I believe, sometimes. There's so many different pots of funding, and it's really hard to navigate. And you got council member funding, so whatever. I won't go through the whole thing. There's lots of ways to get funding in the budget. You definitely need champions. You definitely need council members to help champion your cause, to make sure that they can elevate it to different places and try to help you get funding. For me personally, intersection with my district, doing very specific work that I can see, concrete work in my district helps. If you're doing an arts education in my district, knowing who's it serving, how is it serving, what quantity it's serving, that's extremely helpful. Seeing it is believing in it. So there's a lot of different things like that I think are important. And then, particularly where you're really, really doing work and where your districts are really doing work, you really got to make sure that those members are also looking out for you in the larger processes that take place, I think, as well, and you have champions. But for me, it's, really understanding that's happening in my district or how my district is being served, because that part of funding is really about local sort of stuff that's happening in your district. So for me, it's really understanding how it's affecting the students or the constituents in my district.
Well, I do the same, and I have my budget person meet with you. You submit a one-pager, tell us about your org, how many people you serve, and how is it going to impact my district. And we meet without lobbyists, and not everybody has a lobbyist, but we see the work that you've been doing on the ground, and that's one way, that's one entry.
You know what city gets us all right? Chicago.
Yeah. I always say that.
The best way is to show me what a group is doing in my district, like everybody is saying. you know, you don't really need to sell me on an idea if you can tell me you're serving this many kids at this school or whatever it is. That's really the one thing that we look for. If it's a citywide, you know, a group that's doing work of citywide impact, it's a little bit different and different who you would approach. But the way to do it is always, you don't need a lobbyist to do it, but the way to do it is always to, you know, go to the areas where you're doing the most in a member's backyard. It'd be hard for them not to care about it if you can say that you're, you know, you're serving a certain amount of folks in that district.
I agree with everything that was said. And the last thing I will say, and this sounds like such a politician answer, but there are so many great organizations and not enough money sometimes. It feels like we have in our individual pots, but also the council as a whole. You know, there are, again, some really amazing organizations, and sometimes too many of them. This is New York City. Maybe we need more discretionary funding, right?
On that note, I just want to say thank you one more time for being with us today. You're busy people, and we really value and appreciate your support. And I know you're fighting for us in City Council. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
And thank you for that proclamation. Thank you all for your questions.